tuning in to the Generational Gauntlet Top 5 Faves. This is the podcast where we give you our top 5 on a topic with a generational twist to it. My name is Matt Lambert, and I'm the host of this podcast. Each week, I bring in a guest who's from a different generation than me to discuss or debate our top 5 on a selected topic. When this podcast releases, it will be the day before the national championship game. So with that in mind, today we're covering a college football topic. Today I'm going to be bringing in a fringe, millennial, Gen Xer, my friend Erin Schauwecker. Erin is a realtor in South Carolina who works for Agent Owned. Both myself and my in-laws have used Erin as a realtor in the purchase of homes down here in South Carolina, and I've also sold a home with her. During my life, I've went through the experience of a couple different realtors, and I can say that my experience with Erin has been by far the best. She's like the LeBron James or the Big Ten of realty. She's just the best of the best. All jokes aside, if you're buying or selling down here in South Carolina, you gotta give my girl Erin a shout. When my in-laws were moving, Erin even helped them find a realtor in another state. She's excellent at walking you through the process, fighting for you when things get even the least bit rocky, and making sure that you get the home you actually want during that process. So, Erin, welcome into the podcast. How's everything going your way?
Oh, it's going good. It's Friday, and I'm happy about the Miami victory last night.
I am as well. I was happy to see the SEC not get to the title game, but you're an SEC fan, right?
That's correct, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I wanna see Ole Miss, on the championship stage.
That's fair. So you're an SEC fan, but you have some of those teams that you do not ride or die with, is what I'm hearing.
That is correct.
All right. So when I thought of doing a college football themed episode, you were the very first person that popped into my mind for a couple of reasons. One, we'll see if you agree with this. You are a massive college football fan, correct?
That is correct.
Who's your team? Who do you ride with?
You know that I'm a Georgia Bulldog.
You all ruined my evening several years ago on a New Year's Eve semifinal game. The second reason I brought you on here, and I think this might pop up some today, is that I think we disagree on about 98% of stuff that's sports related. So this should be interesting to see what transpires. I know we had one playoff game last night. We've got another tonight. Before we talk about this top 5 list today, I'm curious who you taking in tonight's game.
I got Indiana.
I've got Oregon by 10. So you've got Indiana, Miami. Who do you think's winning the national title at this point?
Miami.
Okay. All right. I've got Oregon winning it all, is who I think's going to come out of this thing. But we'll see. I'm curious once this plays if our predictions for tonight go through, like whose prediction wins out. So for people listening, if you've not checked out this podcast before, here's how this thing works. We have each put together a top 5 list. Today's topic is the top 5 college football games of all time. You might hear a lot of recency from us. Obviously, I know for me, I didn't see these older games. Some of these older games looked a little boring, but we've each put together our own list. I don't know Erin's list. She doesn't know mine. We're going to find that out as we record. She'll give her number 5, top 5 game, and why. I'll give my number 5, and we'll continue until we work our way to each of our number ones. Now, before we do this, Erin, if I recall, you told me you had a couple of honorable mentions before we kick this thing off, right?
Yes, and I actually narrowed that down after substantial difficulty. I did narrow that down to 1. Um, this thing, let me tell you, this was a very complicated assignment because you forget how many years I've been watching this stuff and how
Yeah.
many games I've watched. And when you start thinking about it and thinking about games that had you standing up and had you excited and, whether it was your team or not, there was just so many. So this was really actually a difficult assignment. I think some people could have put this together really quick. I was not able to. I was looking at this thing from all sides, all angles, all years, all conferences. I was looking at it every which way. But I did narrow it down to one honorable mention that I felt wasn't worthy of the top 5, but should be mentioned.
Okay. Which one's that?
That is, in honor of you, that is the 2006 Ohio State-Michigan game. Ohio State won 42-39. Both of those teams were ranked number 1 and 2 at that time, and the winner of that game ultimately did go on into the championship game, played at Ohio State. The thing about that game for me was there was 3 turnovers by Ohio State. It really didn't look like it was gonna happen, but then, 4 touchdown passes here by Troy Smith,
Hmm.
Heisman, and a recovered onside kick, which I love an onside kick. So anytime somebody wants to throw that in, it just makes me very happy. But that allowed Ohio State to win that game. It was very memorable, a big rivalry. And what I really liked about that game was it wasn't a bowl game, it wasn't a championship game. It was just a normal season game, regular
Hmm.
season game that really, really mattered.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you remember that game.
It might be in my top 5 games.
Ooh, okay.
All right. I'll definitely like that entry. I'm curious to hear, what is your number 5 game?
All right. So, for me, I like things that are exciting,
Hmm.
and I like things that make records. So my number 5 is Texas A&M LSU, 74-72.
Oof. Okay.
This is the game. This was a regular season game. This game changed overtime rules as we know it, and then the overtime rules have since been changed one more time since that. But that game, if you don't recall, had 7 overtimes. It had the record number of snaps, 197 offensive snaps, which at that time was just absolutely unreal. I think it's still unreal even now.
Yeah, definitely.
The game was 4 hours and 53 minutes long, almost made a 5-hour game out of that thing. The new rules were put into place in 2019 as a result of this game, and that is where now you must go for 2 in the second overtime.
Yeah.
But this game went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it was played in College Station. And at that time, LSU was number 8. And that was the most overtimes up to that point. Fans rushed the field. And one of my favorite coaches ever, which this is definitely debatable, but I loved Orgeron. And he was coach then. And that was the last game that they lost. That was the last game LSU lost until they won the national championship the next year.
Yeah.
So that was just a wild game, Joe Burrow, of course. But I remember that, and it just kept going and going and going. And, regular season game, not a bowl game, not a championship game, just a random Saturday where something really unique happened.
It's funny you talked about how challenging this was. I forgot about that game until you just brought it up. But now that you're
Really?
saying it, I'm like, how did I leave that off the list? Like, how did that not make my top 5?
But I told you there is so many. And it's like you look at this thing and it's like you wanna choose something that's really memorable and really special, but special and memorable is in the eye of the beholder.
That's true.
But I remember watching that game, and I was like, "When is this gonna be over?" Like, this just kept going and going, and I love Joe Burrow, and I loved Orgeron, even as a Georgia fan, I just really liked him and what he was doing with that program. And they did not win, obviously. Texas A&M did win that game. Fans rushed the field. It was a whole thing. But they were worried about the safety of having that many snaps.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's why they changed the rules. And they actually changed the rules twice since then. But I remember that game like it was yesterday. So now that you're remembering that game, you can certainly go back and YouTube it.
That's true. That's very true. My
All
number
right, sir. What's
5,
your number 5?
I was gonna say my number 5, I went into your conference for. So
Mm.
I go 2013 Iron Bowl, Auburn 34, Alabama 28. And like you, I wanted games that had an epic moment. And when you have a nickname from one play of the game, and that nickname is the kick six, you got to make the list. So for people that are listening, if you don't remember that game, 2013, Alabama was number 1, undefeated, and seeking their 3rd straight national title. They're playing at number 4 Auburn. There was a berth in the SEC title game and likely the BCS National Championship game at play. A lot of big plays throughout that game, but the biggest was at the very end. So Alabama had quickly moved the ball down the field. The clock ran out. People thought, hey, we're headed to overtime. Maybe not 7 of them, but we're headed to overtime. And Nick Saban famously challenged the timekeeping call. They put 1 second back on the clock. Alabama attempted a 57-yard field goal to win the game. And what happened next was the stuff of legend. Auburn's Chris Davis, who was near the goal line in the back of the end zone, took the ball back after time expired for a 109-yard return to win the game. I was watching that in my first house with Madison, and I remembered she kept saying, is this legal? Like, is this real? And I didn't know the answer. I didn't know if that was allowed. A ton of firepower in this game. For me, beyond just a big play, I needed some big names in it. So if you look at the 2013 season, you had the Maxwell Award winner and the Johnny Unitas Award winner in Alabama's quarterback McCarron. Coach of the Year for Auburn with Malzahn, and the Dick Butkus Award winner in Alabama's CJ Mosley. 45 future NFL players were on the field. The game was sold out, and there were over 13 million people watching in the last half hour, making it the most watched game of 2013. Auburn would go to the SEC title game, they'd win that, and then they would lose in the national title game. But for how epic the ending was, the title implications, just the huge play that everybody remembers, had to make my list.
All right. I'm impressed with that one.
Okay, you might not be impressed with a later one. I'll just throw that caveat
Mhm.
out there.
Oh, I already know what you have. I mean, I'm willing to bet $1,000,000 that there's a particular one that you have on there.
You'll have to let me know if I
I
call
will
it out.
I will let you know. I will let you know.
Which one is your number 4?
Okay. So my number 4, let's see if you've ever heard of this one. Statue of Liberty handoff.
I think I've heard of it, but I'm not remembering which game it is.
Okay. All right. So Boise State 43, Oklahoma 42, 2007 Fiesta Bowl.
Yes. Okay. I didn't very much know that game. Totally mixed up the name of the play for that. But you
Got
you,
it.
you
So
go
you
ahead
have
and
in that game you have several. What I like about that game is, again, regular bowl game, not a championship game, not a playoff
mhm.
game, just a regular old holiday bowl game. 3 trick plays in the end of this game. This coach, the coach of Boise State, was Chris Peterson at the time. He had a hook and lateral touchdown pass covering 50 yards with 7 seconds left to force an overtime. Then he had a 4th down halfback touchdown pass to pull within 1 point in overtime. And then this is the play that you may or may not recall, the Statue of Liberty handoff for a winning 2-point conversion. And what just makes this one extra special for me is as soon as the game was over, Ian Johnson got down on one knee and proposed to his cheerleader girlfriend. You can't do any better out of Hollywood.
He did. He did.
He sure did. He sure did. But I loved this game. It was fun. It was entertaining. It was, it's one of those games that were they ranked? No. Was it a really majorly important bowl game? No. But it was just a really, really fun game to watch and it's very memorable. I actually asked my father this week, think of some game, I asked him, "What's your opinion
Mhm.
on some games?" And that one came to his mind. He said that one he will never forget that, the last few minutes of that game. So, and of course it was an overtime win, 2-point conversion. So that is my number 4.
It's funny. I missed that game. I had to watch it later. Madison and I were dating. We were heading out of town the next morning, so I needed to get on the road at like 6 something in the morning. I went to bed at halftime and I woke up and I remember looking on the ESPN app and I was mortified that I missed that. Like, so as soon as we got back in town, I think I had DVR'd it. I pulled it up and had to watch the game. So that is a fantastic one. I considered it. It was close on my list, but excellent choice by you. I can't fault you on that one at all.
Oh, okay. All
My
right.
number 4 is one that you mentioned as your honorable mention, and that's the 2006 The Game, Ohio State over Michigan, 42-39. From '04 to '09, Ohio State was on a 6-game winning streak against Michigan. but the 2006 version of that game was phenomenal. You already mentioned some of the pieces. I'll go into some other numbers that I think are relevant. It was dubbed the game of the century. And during that time, we're in the BCS era, there was an argument that they should just rematch that game for the national championship. Now, they didn't. They put Florida in, and Florida, ruined that night for me, ruined an entire year of college football. But that game was just so legendary. Ohio State basically locked up their spot in the national title game with that win. In the game, the following award winners were featured. You had the AP Player of the Year, the Bronco Nagurski Award, the Davy O'Brien, the Heisman, the Ted Hendricks Award, the Vince Lombardi Award, the Walter Camp Player of the Year, and 5 first team All Americans on the field. In total, over 40 future NFL players were either on the field or on the sideline during that game. And I mentioned it was called the Game of the Century. It was the most viewed regular college football season, so regular season college football game in history with 21 million viewers. So heavily watched, huge title implications, and in the greatest rivalry in sports. So number 4 for me.
Okay. All right. So, well, you and I are on the same page about that game.
What do
All
you
right.
got for your number
So
3?
so my number 3, and this is where a lot of people will not agree with me. I believe that the Texas USC 2006 Rose Bowl is not worthy of number 1,
Okay.
but it is worthy of number 3. And that was a Texas win. Both teams were undefeated coming into that. You had 2 Heisman Trophy winners, Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush. You also had a Heisman runner-up there in there. This is where we got really familiar with the names Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, and Vince Young. And Vince Young passed and ran for 120 yards on the final 2 possessions of the game with 2 touchdown drives. And what I loved about that game is he derailed the USC dynasty, and a three-peat was prevented.
Hmm.
Texas ended a 34-game winning streak held by USC at that time. And I remember that game like it was yesterday. I watched the entire thing. My husband and I watched the entire thing, and it was just back and forth, back and forth. And some people say that that's the greatest college football game ever. I do not agree with that, but I do believe it's worthy of the top 5 being placed at number 3. At that point, they were the only 2 unbeaten teams. You had Vince Young rushed for 200, passed for 267. They do consider that the greatest Rose Bowl. Not sure I agree with that either. Highest rated BCS game in TV history at that point.
Hmm.
So very good game. I agree. Great game, historical game, tons of numbers, tons of high ranked players. I don't think it's worthy of number 1.
It's funny that you say that. I'm giving away my number 2 here, but I'll speak a little bit more on it. It makes number 2 on my list. So I do agree with you. It's not the greatest game of all time. I do have it one up further than you do, and I'll speak a little bit more to that when we get to our number 2s. Uh, my number 3, and this might be the one that you think you could bet $1 million on. I
Mhm.
have the 2017 College Football Playoff Championship, Alabama over Georgia, 26-23 in overtime. Is this the one you thought was on my list?
That is.
So you
Mhm.
should have put a bet on it. Uh,
Mhm.
I should tell you, you should probably close your ears on what I'm getting ready to share. As a rabid college football fan, I love the championship game. I love the pageantry of it. I'm locked in regardless of who's playing. And I think that the 2017 season ended with a classic. It was a walk-off overtime game-winning touchdown. It featured 2 SEC teams with Nick Saban facing off with a former coordinator, Kirby Smart. If you look at the NFL talent on the field, it's insane. Georgia had a future NFLer, Jake Fromm, Sony Michel and Nick Chubb in the backfield, Terry Godwin, Riley Ridley at receiver, 4 future NFL draft picks on the offensive line, and 2 future draft picks on the defensive side, including 2017 All American Roquan Smith. Bama actually had 2 future NFL quarterbacks in Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa, Damian Harris at running back, Calvin Ridley and Devonta Smith at receiver, 3 future NFL draft picks on the offensive line, and 10 future NFL draft picks on the defensive side of the ball, including All American Minkah Fitzpatrick. 30 total future NFL players took the field. The game had the Chuck Bednarik Award winner, the Dick Butkus Award winner, and the Jim Thorpe Award winner. Now, I think what made this game more challenging for Bama is this game was in Atlanta, so it was basically a home game for Georgia. Georgia was up 13 to nothing at the half, and famously in the second half, Saban threw Tua, brought him off the bench, took him in for Bama, and Tua helped engineer this epic comeback. In overtime, Georgia would settle for a field goal to go up 23 to 20. Tua would throw a 41-yard walk-off bomb to Devonta Smith to put the nail in the coffin. I had my man cave that I was watching this game in back in West Virginia, and it felt like I couldn't turn away from the TV. It was one haymaker after another. This was the first overtime championship game in the college football playoff era, the first championship game to go to overtime since 2003. It had 29.93 million viewers, making it the second most watched event in cable television history. And for the amount of the absolute studs on the field, the epic nature and the way it ended, and for the viewership, I had to put it in my top 5 today. Erin, you got any beef with that one being on the list?
I don't. I was there. I know everything that you just said.
You were at that game?
I was at that game.
I didn't know that. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I was at that game, honey. Yes, I was
Oh,
there. Um, I thought that was it for us. It was a home game for us. There was absolutely no question of that. The atmosphere, we were ready. Everybody was ready for that to happen. It didn't happen. So that's why, thankfully, a couple years later, we back to back
mhm.
championship. But I will tell you that one would have meant more to any Georgia fan than the ones we eventually did win. That because it was in Atlanta, it would have
Yeah.
meant more. So yeah, I was there. I can show you the photos.
Oh,
It was an amazing evening, and it took me a very, very long time to get over that. What happened there?
I don't think I've ever felt like as big of a jerk, as I have just now.
I thought that, I really thought that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, when it didn't happen, it was a real, real big disappointment. But the one thing that I will take from that is I never doubted Kirby. I knew that Kirby would get us there. I knew
Yeah.
that he would get us there, and he did. But it was a great experience to go to a national championship game, like you said, the pomp and circumstance and everything else. It's really incredible.
Yeah. Well, let's wipe the stain of that game away and talk to me about your number 2 all time.
Well, you already talked about my number 2 all time. So my number 2 all time is the Kick Six, Iron Bowl 2013, Auburn
Mhm.
34, Alabama 28. And I will be honest with you, I could have had Auburn on this list all 5 times. Auburn, as much as I hate Auburn, Auburn has had some really, really spectacular games.
They
And
have.
I had to choose from several Iron Bowls. There were several Iron Bowls that I could have put here, but definitely the Kick Six. And as you said, Auburn ended up in the BCS championship game. They lost to Florida State. And then they also went to the SEC championship game, which, side note, I actually went to that game to see Auburn play Mizzou. And Mizzou lost, of course. But yeah, the 109 yards. So basically, that game, as you know, at Auburn, 109 yards as time expired. Chris Davis. If you say Chris Davis's name anywhere in Alabama, they're going to know who you're talking about. Stopped Alabama from a three-peat, of course. And it was a 56-yard Alabama field goal that came up short that
Yeah.
led to that. So it was an amazing game. I remember it like it was yesterday, sitting here watching it. And again, that was a real big year for Auburn. They also beat Georgia that year at home, and just a really, really that game. I mean, they stormed the field, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I actually think for an Auburn fan, that game meant more than any other game that year. I think that game meant so much more to them.
Yeah.
But if you hear the word Iron Bowl, the phrase Kick Six is going to come into your brain. But that is my number 2. There was nothing that could have took that spot other than the Kick Six.
Yeah, it's such a great moment. It's funny. I try to show Nora some of these sporting events. She doesn't care because she didn't live through it. And I've shown her that, and she's like, "Oh, okay, cool." And I have goosebumps watching it. Like the call, and I can't remember the analyst that made that call, but it was just pageantry. It was you couldn't script a better ending. and to a more deserving team to take an L like that, like than Alabama. And I think you can maybe agree with me on that.
Well, sure, and of course, that was Nick Saban, and, anytime he takes an L, I'm a happy person, but you gotta understand that I have to say this about the Iron Bowl, you're talking to a Georgia fan,
Yeah.
I hate both of those teams,
Mhm.
so the Iron Bowl is one of my favorite games to watch because it's like watching the person you hate beat up the person you hate, and it's kinda like, who do you hate more today? And I will be honest with you that, Auburn did beat us that year, and it was a really similar kinda deal,
Yeah.
actually, and, Auburn beat us that year, and I wasn't sure who I was pulling for in that game. It was a very conflicting game for me. I wasn't sure who do I want to win this thing or not. But when that happened, I will say I was kinda happy for Auburn, because it happened at home. It happened in the last second of the game. It was a really amazing thing, and I think even 50 years from now, people will be talking about the kick six.
Oh, I'll be telling my grandkids about it 100%. My number 2, we've already mentioned it was my number 2. It's that BCS national title game with Texas and USC. And you already went through a bunch of the stats. You mentioned we had 2 Heisman Trophy winners on the field. We had the runner-up for the Heisman with Vince Young on the field as well. I'll throw a couple things in just to sell this game more. In terms of the NFL future NFL production on the field, I think people forget USC had Matt Leinart, but they also had Mark Sanchez behind him. They had Reggie Bush, but they also had Lindell White. They had Mike Williams and Steve Smith at receiver, Brian Cushing at linebacker. And Texas had, I think, maybe more of like the team camaraderie. They had a guys that maybe some Texas fans would recognize the name. I honestly don't. But that Texas team was so deep that buried on the bench was future stars like Colt McCoy and Jamal Charles. What I do remember is going into this game, USC was a juggernaut. And everybody that I talked to expected USC to just destroy Texas in this game. In the game, you had the current Heisman winner, the AP Player of the Year award winner, the Doak Walker award winner, and the Walter Camp Player of the Year. All belonged to Reggie Bush. Leinart had won the Johnny Unitas Award. Vince Young had won the Davy O'Brien, the Manning Award, and the Maxwell Award. Bush, Leinart, and Young were all Heisman finalists that year. Texas also had the Thorpe Award winner, and their coach was Coach of the Year. In total, 49 future NFL players were on the field. And you mentioned watching this game and just the insanity of it, especially in that last drive by Texas. I was actually watching this game at a buddy's house with a big group of guys. None of us were a Texas or USC fan, yet all of us were losing our minds. I think everybody in the room was rooting for Texas. We wanted to see the underdog win. And I think that Vince Young's performance was one of the greatest performances I've ever seen in any championship game. Some have later dubbed this the game of the century. It set major records in terms of viewership. It had 35.6 million viewers, making it the most watched game in US television history. So I agree with you. It can't be number one. You had it number three. I've got it number two. But I think it definitely has to be on the list for just how crazy this game was.
I agree, and I also was, at the time rooting for Texas. I really did think USC was gonna blow them out, because, at that time, that's just what it was. USC
Mhm.
was blowing everybody out, and for Texas to win that game, that was kind of a turning point for them for a little while, and then, of course, later they joined the SEC and things changed. But, I was happy to see that, and, that was a great game, and if you Google it's funny because if you search the greatest college games ever, like, everybody rates that game as number 1,
Yep.
and when I saw that, I was like, "No, like, I do not agree that that game is number 1."
I
I
I
just
agree
I
with
just
you.
don't. It needs to be in the top 5, it needs to
Mhm.
be in the, you know, most, number of Heisman people, all those kind of things. It needs to be noted for those, but I just didn't feel that that game at that time, with some of the games that we've had since then, was
Yeah.
worthy of the number 1 spot.
Well, speaking of that number one spot, I'm interested to hear what did take your number one on the list.
Remember, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and for me, it has to be the Midnight Miracle. and that is Georgia 42, Ohio State 41,
What are you doing to me,
2022 Peach
Erin?
Bowl. Ruggles missed 50-yard field goal. Marvin Harrison Jr. was out in the fourth quarter. I'm sure you do recall that. You have to
Targeting.
remember, Georgia is a fourth quarter team. And
Yeah.
although we did not score any points in the third quarter, we scored 18 points in the fourth quarter, rallied from 2 touchdown deficits in each half of the game. My thing with this is Georgia should not have won this game. But somehow, some way, they kept clawing back and they won this game. Again, Georgia shut out third quarter. Bennett had 398 yards. Bennett and Stroud, both Heisman finalists. Kirby call, of course, you remember, Kirby calls timeout in fourth quarter, just as Ohio State went for a fake punt on 4th and 1. Georgia ran for 135 yards and finished with 533 total yards. And the one takeaway from this, we, of course, went on to play TCU, won back-to-back national championships. But the thing I took from this, and I'll never forget, was at the end of that game, they interviewed C.J. Stroud, and he said that that was the most fun game he ever played, even though it turned out the way it did.
Yeah.
So, of course, this was a Peach Bowl. This was a home game for Georgia. But for those who are listening who don't really understand what this game was, um, a missed field goal as the clock struck midnight on New Year's. So Georgia fans and the media calls this the midnight miracle, and it was. And Georgia fans refer to it as that. And that game, to me, I view that game as the national championship game that year. I do not view us going on to play TCU as the national championship game. The national championship game was that Peach Bowl in 2022. Those were the two best teams, and that was it, number 1 and 2, even though that's not what they said, but that's what it was. That game was the national championship game. Whoever won that game was going to win the national championship. So I look at that as really critical moment, allowing Georgia to win back-to-back national championships. But again, Georgia should not have won that game. They were down, down, and down, and they just kept coming back. But again, fourth quarter team, that's what we were then. We still are that. But that game, it was a fantastic game. It was a back and forth, very entertaining game. But again, that was the national championship game. I cannot stress that enough. I don't, as a Georgia fan and as a football fan, I really don't look at that TCU game as the natty.
Hmm.
I don't. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
That whole Final Four kind of went wrong that year. So I do view that as the national championship game that year. So that is my number one. I will say that was a really hard choice. There was another one that I was going to put in. It was either going to be number one or not on the list.
Okay.
And I will mention that, and that's the Georgia-Oklahoma Rose Bowl in 2018.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was between those two for me. And they were either going to be number one or not on the list for me. So I had to go with this one just because it was a little bit more important, I felt like.
Yeah.
So that's it. But yes, the Rose Bowl, Oklahoma Rose Bowl 2018, that was another contender for me. So those are mine. I feel that you and I actually had very similar views on this.
We
But
we did.
you'll have to tell me what your number one is.
It is. I will. I will say I don't feel bad now about having Alabama over Georgia since you had this one on your list. So, when that kick missed, I remember Madison had went to bed and I was screaming in the living room, and she came in and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was laid on my back in the floor. I was like, "The year is already off to a bad start." I
Well, and
was
you have to remember,
devastated.
I was doing the same exact thing, but for a very different reason.
It is weird how like our sports teams can either make our day, our year, or absolutely just ruin the day for us. And they ruined my New Year's. But speaking of a time when my year wasn't ruined, my number one, I'm going all the way back to 2003. And it's Ohio State over Miami, BCS National Championship, 31-24 in double overtime. And I'm going to give a little context before I get into some stats. I'm gonna go on a little diatribe on this one, but one of the reasons this ranks so high for me, I had always watched college football with my dad. We'd went to Marshall games because they were nearby, but I didn't really become a fan until the season before Ohio State won a national championship. I started watching Ohio State. The second year, I didn't really know what to expect. And as we won that national title, I thought that happened every year. I was very disappointed to find out that wasn't true, but I was like, "Oh, your team just wins yearly. This is great." I found that out wouldn't happen again for another 12 years. But for me, that game, it really instilled my love for college football. Just the all the emotions are ingrained in my psyche. So since Erin is a big SEC fan, I don't want her to think, hey, I'm showing some just Ohio State favoritism. So let me do like Juvenile said and back that thing up. The 2002 Miami Hurricanes were the defending national champs. And if you think back to that team, they were basically an NFL team. They had Ken Dorsey at quarterback, Willis McGahee and Frank Gore at running back, Andre Johnson at wideout, Kellen Winslow the second at tight end, and on defense, they had guys like Antrell Roll, Sean Taylor, Vince Wilford, and Jonathan Vilma. Miami had had some close games. They only won by a point over number 9 Florida State, but they had beaten the brakes off of number 6 Florida, number 17 Pittsburgh, and number 18 Virginia Tech. My Buckeyes that year were the cardiac kids. They had so many close games. We had a quarterback that probably would never be the quarterback in most of our seasons, Craig Krenzel. We had a freshman running back in Maurice Clarett. We had a two-way star in Chris Gamble, but what we were really known for was our defense. Guys like Will Allen, Mike Doss, Robert Reynolds. We had beaten some good teams, number 10 Washington State, number 17 Penn State, number 23 Minnesota, and number 9 Michigan. But our wins were ugly. We won by only 4 points over Cincinnati, 5 over Wisconsin, 6 over Penn State. We only beat Purdue 10-6 on the famous Holy Buckeye play, had an overtime win over Illinois, and only 5 points over Michigan. Going into this game, Miami was an 11.5 point favorite, and everyone thought the Buckeyes can't match their speed. This game ended up being a smash mouth back and forth affair. Miami would kick a field goal as time expired to send it into overtime. In the first overtime, Miami was up 24-17. And the most controversial play on 4th and 3, Krenzel threw a pass to Chris Gamble. It was ruled incomplete. Miami rushed the field, and a late flag was thrown by Terry Porter, which I'm going to go on record. It was the right call. It was pass interference. He was delayed, but it was pass interference. And if you're a Miami fan, because I got a buddy who is, in the fourth quarter, the refs missed a clear pass interference and defensive holding call that the Buckeyes would have ran the clock out. It should never have went to overtime. But anyway, the Buckeyes would score on a 1-yard TD run, and in the second overtime, Maurice Clarett would score the go-ahead TD, and Ohio State would hold on 24-17. This game had a whopping 58 future NFL players on their rosters. Some may call this the most controversial game in history, but I think that adds to the mystique. You had an underdog knock off the defending national champs in double overtime, and people get so focused on the flag, they forget about plays like Maurice Clarett literally chasing down a Miami defender to rip an intercepted ball out of his hands. I think if you talk to many college football fans, this is going to make the list of iconic games in history. This game drew 29.1 million viewers and at the time was the most watched college football game in BCS history. So, Erin, I'm curious, was this game anywhere on your radar?
No, that game was not on my radar,
Oh,
and I don't think that game's on a lot of people's radar.
I beg to differ. As a Buckeyes fan, this is probably one of my most fun and stressful games that I experienced was that Miami National Championship.
Well, and a national championship is very stressful, but
It is.
when I think Ohio State, I mean, it goes back to a couple for me all the time, which is Ohio State, Michigan,
Mhm.
Ohio State, Michigan State. There was a couple of those that were kinda out
That's
there.
true.
And then, of course, a little further back than we're talking, Penn State used to be a big factor there. So, when I
Yeah.
think Ohio State, uh, you know, real nail biter games, it's kind of those teams that I think about. I
Mhm.
don't associate Miami with that, but that was a championship game. And that's why, and that's why I'm going to tie into that. That's kind of why I'm for Miami now. They've been out of this thing for a while. They've kind of just been down there and in the ACC, which
Mhm.
you and I have our feelings about the ACC, but
Overrated. Yep.
I kind of want to see them kind of rise from the ashes a little bit. You're out of it, I'm out of it. I kind of want to see them be a factor again, be a
Mhm.
contender again, because I think it's a really interesting team, and I think it's in a really interesting conference. And Miami didn't even get to play in their conference championship game this year, but yet they go on to the playoffs. So I think, yeah, Miami in the past for sure. I have to investigate that game a little bit further. Might have to pull that one up. I watched so many clips this week, but that one did not cross my path.
Oh, that is, like I said, I remember before the flag was thrown, I was on my hands and knees, and my mom and dad were looking at me like, "What is wrong with you?" And then the flag was thrown. I think I was shirtless at one point, and I was young and stupid. I was like 16 when this game came about. And I remember telling my dad, I said, if we win the national championship, I'm running down the street shirtless. And this is West Virginia in January. And my dad let me do it. So here I am, like shirtless, sprinting down the street like an idiot, and just the joy that I had. My parents were buying me like the championship shirts. And then I was very disappointed when I learned this was not a yearly occurrence. Like you don't see a natty every year. Like you every now and then Georgia, like you got a couple in a row, but they're not an every year guarantee. And I found that out the hard way.
No, and that's why when you do win, and even though, like I said, we beat TCU that year to win the national championship, it's still very, very special.
Hmm.
Winning a national championship and going to a game of a national championship game, it is a very, very special thing.
Yeah.
So that's why when your team gets there, be supportive, be positive. But I really, like I said, felt that year our game was the game. And whoever was going to win that game, that was going to be your national championship.
Yeah.
That was going to be your national champion. So I'm glad that you dug back a little bit in history. Got that one's over 20 years ago,
I did. I
and
did.
and that's good. But I will say I would like to say that this was challenging. I mean, there's so many that I when I started thinking about them, I was like, well, gosh, that could be one.
Uh-huh.
That could be one. And it was really difficult. And I was trying, and I was even looking into Oregon. Some of those Oregon games have been real nail biters, but
Yeah.
it just seems like none of them kind of fit the bill of the ones that you and I chose. But I was looking at them because they really run up the score a lot.
Yeah.
So you have really high scoring games with them, but there just wasn't one that stood out. But I kind of wanted to find one of theirs and include it. But I really think we have, between the two of us, we do have the correct teams. We do have
I
the
like that.
correct games. I do. And it's like I told you the other day, they were not going to be all SEC. Although I will say they would never have been it would have been Auburn. Believe it or not. I mean, I
Yeah.
just kept coming across freaking Auburn I mean, these games that Auburn had with Florida, some of them. But I let those go, and I pulled the ones that were real priorities that
Yeah.
really checked all the boxes. I kinda had a checklist of the game has to have the following, and those were the games that I chose. Records, notoriety at the last minute, that kinda thing. But
Yeah.
I this was a fun assignment, and I appreciate you asking me to join you on this one, and I hope that I provided some valuable insight.
You did. And speaking of valuable insight, I think an area that you provide a lot of valuable insight is as a realtor. And if it's cool with you, I've got some questions for you here on the back end that for anybody listening, I'd like them to be able to get some more information about you if that's cool.
That's cool.
All right. So, number one, I know you're obviously in the realty business. How long have you been in realty?
So I've been a realtor since 2007, and I'm born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. So I have been a realtor here that entire time.
That is a long time. Erin, you and I are both getting up there. You do it all, right? Buying, selling, like the whole nine yards for people, correct?
I do it all. Yep. We buy, we sell, we manage rentals if needed. We help with relocation in the area, out of the area. We do a
Hmm.
lot of military. And when I say we, I mean myself and my company. I've
Yeah.
recently joined agent owned. I was formerly with a small boutique firm, and my broker there is going to retire and close the business. So I've recently moved to agent owned,
Hmm.
and they have a wonderful relocation department there to help people get where they're going. And those are the things that we do. And I do condos, townhomes, investments. I do estate sales, those sort of things.
And I was going to ask, like, what does your typical customer base look like? Or is there even a typical customer base?
In this market, there is not a typical customer base because I am getting everything from down, 55 and over,
Hmm.
like in the Nexton area, wanting to buy in 55 and over communities. I still do a lot of first time home buyers. I do a lot of investors still. Investors had kind of gone out of the market for a while, but they're coming back in a little bit. And I do a lot of condos, townhomes, and properties with HOAs
Yeah.
because I'm a condo expert.
Okay. And what would you like a potential client to know about you? Like, what is it that sets you apart?
The most important thing that somebody needs to factor in when they're shopping for a real estate agent is they need to know what they're getting.
Hmm.
And when you hire me, you get me. You do not get an assistant. You do not get an associate. You do not get a closing coordinator. You do not get somebody else in the company that's new, that's taking phone calls. When you hire me, you get me, and you're paying for my expertise and no one else. I do not shuffle my clients off to someone else. A big part of the realtor world right now is teams
Hmm.
where there are several agents on a team and they share the business. I do not do that. You call me, you get me.
I can speak to that from both my in laws using you, from me using you as well. I know I've had realtors in the past where I didn't know which person I was getting that day. Like, am I getting him? Am I getting her? And every time I showed up, we knew we were getting you. I, I love the fact that you mean what you say. There's no hidden games, there's no smoke and mirrors. You're honest with your clients. I like somebody that's straightforward with me and transparent. And that's what you are. If people are looking or interested in you, how can they find out more information or how could they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me very simply by just texting or calling. They can call 843-696-4950. They can text anytime, or they can go on my website, which is charlestoncondosales.com. And they can email me at erinsellscharleston@gmail.com. But the best way to get me the fastest is you just go ahead and shoot me a text, and I'll call you when it's convenient for you.
I was gonna
Mhm.
say I'm gonna plug all of Erin's details about her realty business into the episode description. So if you are looking in this area, if you're interested in finding out more, you'll see her information in the episode description today. If you're looking to buy or sell, you got to give my girl a call. So Erin, I appreciate you jumping on here with me today. I think we didn't argue as much as I expected, but still a good time. Always good hearing your voice and being able to catch up with you a bit.
And you too.
And importantly, I also appreciate all of you all for checking out the podcast. Please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and let someone know to check this thing out. I want this podcast to cover topics that interest you. If you have a top 5 list that you want us to rank, I take suggestions at generationalfave5@gmail.com. That's generational, FAVE, the number 5 at gmail.com. Thank you for tuning in.